tense, isn't it?
Yeah. Welcome everyone to another YEV podcast, and today we're going to be talking about the progress of electric HGVs. And joining us, other than the normal Alex Grant, Kevin Booker, is Jamie Sands from Welch Group, and I'm Tim Aylen as usual. And yeah, I think what we should start with is Jamie, if you could introduce yourself and maybe give us a quick understanding of why you're here talking about electric trucks.
Sure, why not? How do I make it sound like I'm not at a networking event? So I'm Jamie. I'm head of solutions at Welch Group. We're an independent family-owned transport operator in the east of England. Technically an SME, so 70 trucks, 150 people. We run trucks around the east of England, mainly Bedfordshire, Herts, Cambridgeshire, a bit of northern Essex. My job is to look after technology innovation and sustainability for the group. So I get to go out into the world and look at all the cool fun projects, electric trucks, AI, digital transformation, all that fun stuff. Welch Group have been, I guess, known over the last few years for spearheading the move into electric HGVs. We got one of the first electric rigids on the road nearly 3 years ago now, charging infrastructure in the ground,
3 years ago
solar
now.
panels on the roof, all that sort of stuff. Was lucky enough to get onto the zero emission HGV infrastructure demonstrator, which is a government funded program that allowed us to accelerate that transition. So we've got 2 battery electric Arctic units out of that, and we've got megawatt charging stations going in at our Bedford and our Duxford site. So new grid connections, hypercharging, all that cool stuff.
It's all going on.
There's a lot happening, yeah.
And this is why it's great to have you on, because you guys started so early in the electric HGV world, and I think it's important to say that from a HGV point of view, there is so much going on, and we're going to try and condense this into an hour. We will probably go over slightly. I mean, from my point of view, I'm coming at this from I was never really into trucks. And then all of a sudden, I'm really interested to talk about trucks because of what I do with Dynamon, where we take the data and do digital simulation twinning of vehicles to understand feasibility, charging infrastructure, TCO, TCC, and CO2 modeling, but ultimately just making electrification work. But we will be talking a little bit about hydrogen, LNG, and CNG as well. Probably a sprinkle of HVO in there as well. Alex and Kevin, or maybe Alex first, where do you fit into the HGV discussion? Because I think you cover quite a lot when it comes to legislation on HGVs, don't you?
I've done a bit in the States. I've done less in Europe than I've done over here. It's quite interesting in the States. I mean, a lot of the sort of underlying deadlines and things like that have been pulled back in the last year, which is a bit of a pain. But yeah, California was kind of leading the way with that, sort of setting deadlines for different types of fleets and so on to kind of have electric trucks in place. But it was very much a small market, and a lot of the issues over there that people were coming out with were things like, I mean, you could only really do it on a short distance thing over there, so you could do kind of local stuff like ports and so on because of the distances. When you've got a long distance trucking thing in the States, it's thousands of miles. It's not something that you can do quite so easily. And there were some issues in terms of downtime in charges as well. So there were certainly some challenges over there. Interestingly, I mentioned about, I mean, without wanting to take too much of a detour, it's quite interesting. They were saying that they reckon they were going to be long distance trucking would be cost effective in the States. So the most challenging applications within a decade. And that was a few years ago. So, I mean, I don't know how much things have picked up in the meantime. So even in the States where, I mean, you're talking about vast distances and a non-existent infrastructure, there's still quite a kind of a focus on, an underlying focus on going electric. So that's all very promising, I think.
Their energy is cheap, isn't it? That's one of the big factors. Yeah, you can get cheap energy, makes it worthwhile pretty quickly.
Yeah, the cost of electricity makes the biggest difference, doesn't it, when it comes to the HGV? And I'm sure we'll touch upon that. I think in a lot of ways, we're quite lucky being on an island. We don't actually have to go too far. So I think
long haul's not really long haul.
No, it isn't. Yeah. What about yourself, Kev? You've been helping charging fleets, but it doesn't get much heavier than sort of 18-ton, if that, does it? With what you do,
the stuff the biggest we do is like small vans and stuff. So we've not, but obviously you see the sort of, the areas where I'm based, you see the rigid trucks because of the size of the area. Brecon, you're not going to get your big HGV doing your Tesco delivery or your Morrison's delivery. A lot of the time you get your rigid ones. And I actually have a question for Jamie, because obviously you mentioned it was a small to medium enterprise. Why do you think, because it's a big undertaking to jump to electric trucks, and as a small company, I think that's quite an achievement. So what do you think has driven that innovation within sort of the company you work for? Because obviously you'd expect your big DPDs and your big massive companies to do it, but a small one, that's a lot of commitment, and to try something new when it has a substantial overhead for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. Part of it is because we're such a heritage organization. We've been around for 91 years and we're still under family ownership. So my boss, Chris, is fourth generation. It was his great granddad that started it all. So there's not that impetus to put as much focus on, just making profit in Q2, for example. The focus is, how do we make this company last for another 90 years? So being ahead of the game when it comes to big transitions like this becomes probably a bit more important. I think the other thing is that we saw the opportunity, and I think that's a piece that a lot of people haven't really fully understood yet. This idea that for 100 years this industry has been beholden to big oil. So fuel is a third of our cost base, and diesel costs what diesel costs. But in the world of electric, you can store it, you can buy it when it's cheap, use it when it's expensive, you can generate your own, you can do all kinds of funky stuff with energy markets, and that's a massive opportunity, like a huge commercial advantage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just to get things rolling, let's get straight into vehicles without further ado. And I think maybe if you could touch upon, when we start talking about the challenges, which I'm sure we'll touch upon once we talk about the progress, you can maybe talk about what, Jamie, what you've been doing recently with your 12 pillars of change. But if we go for 4 pillars up until that point, and then we can add the pillars on after that. But yeah, from a technology point of view, you mentioned that you Welch Group, they started 3 years ago, and you've got Renault trucks. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
we run a Renault truck and van center, so we can repair and maintain all our own vehicles, and that's kind of all part of it. So it was one of the first Renault truck and van centers to be able to repair and maintain these vehicles as well, which is another one of those commercial advantages. Yeah.
And how's the reliability been?
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely spot on. Yeah, couldn't fault them. We've not had them long enough to really see the impact, but sort of anecdotally people talk about, there's less to go wrong, you're not fixing stuff, and yeah, they've been absolutely bulletproof.
I suppose you come from an area where you've seen it right at the beginning 3 years ago, but what progress have we got to now in terms of not just Renault but all the other OEMs out there?
I think you see it when you look at the headline stats of the vehicles that are coming through. So the early Renault and the early Volvos, which are the first ones that you saw any kind of numbers on the road. Range, for example, you was looking at 180, 200 miles. Whilst it has use cases, it's not everything, and they needed to get better. But then the Mercedes e-Actros 600, which is kind of the leading truck at the moment, seems to be in this country, can do 300 miles. Then the Chinese Windrose can do 400 miles. And that's over the course of 4 or 5 years. So the rate of change is just spectacular.
Yeah.
Where do you start then? Which vehicles would you start with, and how do you identify vehicles that are suitable to switch?
I mean, that's more of a Tim question than anything. That's kind of his bread and butter, isn't it, at Dynamon? But yeah, it starts with the data. It starts with understanding your operation, and not just kind of anecdotally understanding your operation by speaking to the planners, but digging into your telematics and your planning data, figuring out exactly what can work and where, and leaning on partners that have got some kind of data analytic capabilities to properly be able to dig into that stuff. We talk a lot about low-hanging fruit. Don't look at your longest route and your heaviest load and go, look, I can't do it, so I'm not going to bother. I think most operators have got an amount of low-hanging fruit, local deliveries, stuff that's just shunting backwards and forwards, the easy stuff. And important, just to sort of start that journey. The biggest piece of advice I always used to give other operators was start with the energy, like start with charging infrastructure. Don't think about the trucks until you know that you can charge them. And often that means, talking to your DNO, can you get more power into your depot? How much headroom have you got? All that sort of stuff.
Was that how much of a challenge was that for you? Because I know grid connections can be a real pain in terms of getting charging infrastructure, and obviously with trucks, presumably you need quite a high. You can't avoid having a high load, really, can you?
No, not at all. You can be flexible with when you take that load, and there's stuff you can do to minimize it. But we was lucky, and that's part of it. So we had a decent amount of headroom at the depot, so we put a 150 kilowatt DC charger in pretty early on. So that we could service these vehicles on a kind of back to base basis. But like I say, we got megawatt grid upgrades at our Bedford and Duxford depots, and they're just in the process of coming through now. And actually, we've been waiting on legals for the civils more than we've been waiting on actually getting the grid connection. So at Bedford, we're about to go live with our hub there, and the energy's ready, and we're waiting on the lawyers to decide whether we're allowed to dig up the road or not. So there are issues out there, and I've seen it. 10-year wait, millions of pounds if you want decent amount of power, but we've not seen it.
I had a really good question from Dean in the chat. He just said, "What's the feedback of the drivers? Do they actually prefer driving them?" Yeah, we're actually going to be taking one off of one of our drivers because it's moving between sites because Bedford's got its charging infrastructure now, and he's not happy at all. So we might have to get another one just to keep him. The low noise, low vibrations, all the stuff from the car world. The torque, the acceleration, the technology that's in these vehicles, which isn't necessarily sort of EV specific, but they're really well kitted out. They're much nicer places to be. Yeah. And how many HGVs do you guys run currently? Electric ones.
Electric. So we've got the first rigid. So that's an E-Tech D-wide, and then 2 of the Arctic units. So 42 ton.
And is there any plans to increase on that? I mean, and I'm sure we'll come to the cost point in a minute, because the electric trucks cost double a diesel truck. Just the initial capex, the initial outlay. So it's all about looking at it from a long-term perspective. But yeah, because I think, aren't Renault bringing out a new truck soon?
There's a long range. So yeah, Volvo and Renault have got a long range one coming out early next year.
Okay.
But yeah, we're kind of all in at this point. So we're about to order another couple of rigids. So we're looking at repowering one of our diesel trucks. So we're working with a company called Clean Drive, who've been working with First Bus, repowering buses. So sort of donated a rigid to them to see what that looks like. Going to get a 7.5 tonner on the fleet. And yeah, a couple more Arctics hopefully in our future, but that comes down to the money men, whether they want to make that outlay here.
When you speak about...
Sorry, you go, Kev.
Yeah, when you speak about repowering them and stuff, actually, that's a question I've had. What sort of duty cycles because there's a lot of people probably think of a car doing like 80, 100,000, Tim with his 200,000 mile Tesla. What sort of duty cycles are these vehicles doing? How long do you keep a truck mileage wise, diesel or petrol? And this is where, what would you replace in your diesel truck over that lifetime? And what are you expecting to replace in your electric truck over that lifetime?
Yeah, we keep vehicles a lot longer than a lot of operators, partly because of the way we buy the vehicles. We buy everything outright. We own everything, and that's always been that philosophy: buy it and sweat the asset. And partly because of owning our own repair and maintenance, so we've got a lot of control over it. So diesel Arctics, for example, we might keep for 8 years. With the EVs, honestly, we don't really know yet. I'd like to think they're going to last a lot longer. I'm pretty convinced they're going to last a lot longer. But that's part of this journey, isn't it?
And what sort of miles?
Figuring that stuff out.
What sort of miles would they do in that 8-year period?
Over 8-10 years, you can do 100,000 miles a year. So it's not unusual for them to hit 1 million before you get rid of them. We've had one recently that's ticked over on the clock. They get to 1 million, and it goes back to 0.
What sort of, you said about you doing the maintenance and stuff? this is a thing I'm interested in. What would be replaced over 1 million miles in a truck?
Basically everything. Triggers broom, isn't it? Yeah. And ultimately, the reason that they get pulled off fleet is that it's mechanical. It's all in the engine. Yeah, it becomes more to maintain it than it's worth it. And when you talk about electric trucks, yeah, there's nothing there. They're so simple. If anything's going to go, it's the battery. Yeah, and that's the worry, is how long the battery's going to last.
This is an interesting point. So, are you able to do a battery health test on your 3-year-old Renaults?
We can. We haven't. We work quite closely with Cambridge University. Doing some academic research stuff, and that's something they're looking at, something that they're monitoring.
Because are the Arctics, are they the same battery spec as the Volvo? So 570 kilowatt hour, was it 540 kilowatt hour battery, but a usable for usable of 370.
Yep.
Yeah. So you would think that it's only ever going to stay in the usable for certainly for the first 8 years. It'd be really interesting. I think this is one of the big challenges, isn't it, from a value point of view, about understanding the residual value after it's been in service for that many years. So are you allowed to share any of the data on state of health of the batteries yet?
I've not seen it myself.
No. Okay.
The project from Cambridge University, it's called Project JOLT, Joint Operators Logistics Trial. They'll be publishing stuff quite soon, my understanding is. So it'll be out there.
So I'm guessing from the comment on the diesel vehicles, in that over that 1 million miles, they would have had multiple engine replacements.
Well, yeah, not engine replacements. They're pretty solid, but it's all the stuff that goes around it. It's usually AdBlue faults are kind of the bane of our lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Euro emissions technology not really helping things. Sorry, go on, Alex.
I was going to say, if memory serves, the study in the States assumed that there was going to be one battery replacement during the lifetime of the vehicle, but it was also assuming similar kind of quite large replacements of components on the diesel vehicles as well. So it's quite interesting that it would be interesting to see how long the batteries last and whether what effect that has on things like your sort of TCO on those, or whether it's not. I mean, of all the vehicles that that are likely to really kind of push the limits of the battery, it's going to be interesting to see how 1 million miles worth of usage kind of how batteries fare after that time.
Yeah, and it's a technology that's getting better all the time as well. And not just the battery cell technology, but the systems that sit around it, which make a really big difference. So preconditioning and keeping them in a safe temperature ranges, all that sort of stuff really helps.
And are you currently just keeping within the range of the depot, or have you other than the normal kind of maybe testing, have you done any journeys where you've charged, I say publicly inverted commas, but have you gone further afield from the depot?
We have. We don't need to. So in day-to-day operations, there's no need for them to go too far because it's just easy to put them on the diesel vehicles. So when we do, it's because we're deliberately pushing them. So we've charged in other places. We've charged at other people's depots. We've charged at bus depots. We've charged at dealer locations. So there's options out there. But the reality is, for us, there's no need to, because there's so much work that keeps it within the range and the payload needs.
Yeah. Well, if you let's say you swapped, obviously you wouldn't do this right now, but if you swapped all of your vehicles for electric right now, what would be the increase in downtime and cost on having an electric vehicle, not including the cost of the vehicle? Would it be a huge impact to the operation? I'm guessing it would.
I don't think it would. We did a big data study piece right at the start with Energy Savings Trust.
Yeah.
And they discovered that it was only 30% of our operations that operationally would struggle when you talk about range and payload. And I think we're really, really close to the point where it will be almost insignificant. It will come down to having infrastructure in the right place. Because the problem is that our operation is quite ad hoc. So we can be going anywhere on any given day. There's not set lanes. We're not driving backs and forwards, DC to DC. So if a customer suddenly wanted to just go to a location where there wasn't infrastructure on that route, then we wouldn't be able to do it.
No.
So it's more about charging than it is about the trucks.
Yeah, so you're actually one of the more difficult operations to do with that type of thing, where you've got your fixed routes, you know, your courier companies, where they're going basically every day, multiple drops between the same sites, or your Tesco's. You've actually got, you know, you could have different things every day. So you could argue that's the harder type of truck.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, but it does also mean that you can build for the electrics. So when you're planning your routes day by day, you build a load of routes up, and then you give the easy ones to the electric trucks. But yeah, I always say some of the big 3PLs that are just going DC to DC, and like the buses is the same. It's like easy mode, isn't it? You know exactly how far they're going. They're never going to do anything different. Then you spec the vehicle to do it. Either can do it or it can't.
Yeah,
there's one of the parcel companies in Switzerland that are going up and over the Alps, and they're saying it's all uphill one side and all downhill the other side. And they say they know that particular route is basically 4 seasons of the year. They can do that route regardless of weather conditions and all the rest of it. They know they can always do it, but it's kind of like they just charge at each end of the route and just send the truck backwards and forwards between the 2 spots. And they said it's one of those where it looks on paper like the worst. I mean, it's snow and ice and you know, straight up a hill and all the rest of it. But they're saying they've just found these kind of set routes where it works really well. So it's interesting seeing that you can all, you know, how easy it can be to do it, you know, to sort of incorporate over a kind of a more dynamic you know, set of routes.
I bet the regen's crazy. You're going down the other side of the Alps.
Hopefully it's empty up and then heavy down.
yeah.
I mean,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, that's actually a question. So, if on a truck, is regen quite significget? Because obviously you use engine braking and stuff. Have you got any data on what sort of how much do you actually get back on a route potentially compared to? You know,
it can be up to 30%.
30%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because you think the momentum. So when you're fully loaded, so you're running at, you know, almost 42 ton. It's just a massive amount of momentum.
I know where this is going, Jamie. I think Kevin wants to get his Class 1 license, and I think he wants to do a world record. Have you ever thought he's got enough world records in vehicles? You know, I think maybe you need to step it up a gear, so to speak, mate.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking of the ideal route in Tenerife, where you start at the highest point, which has a charger, go downhill, start with the truck empty of charge, and be full by the bottom.
Have either of you guys driven an electric truck or a truck in general?
I've driven an electric rigid Mercedes, and it was so easy. But I've never driven a diesel truck. So
yeah, same. I've driven I think an 11-ton Renault truck and a Mercedes rubbish truck, and the smile on my face was I was sat behind the wheel of this enormous steering wheel on the rubbish truck was it's like a 5-year-old again. It's great.
I mean,
because
I'm old, I can drive 7.5 ton, and I don't think Alex is quite old enough to have grandfather rights on his license. I don't know if Tim is.
No, sorry, mate.
So I can drive 7.5 ton with no training whatsoever.
That's terrifying.
I should add, I drove them off road. I wasn't driving them on a public space. It was at Millbrook Proving Ground a few years ago. But yeah, it was good fun.
I've never driven a big truck. Driven buses off road, but never a truck.
Maybe we need to get Yutong or one of the others to give you a sponsored drive, Kev. See what the maximum range you can do. I think that's got to be the step up that you're looking for, right? We've obviously talked a little bit about the background, about the vehicles. I'm conscious from a time point of view. I want to try and get as much in as possible without forcing it through, so to speak. But I think it's really important for us to talk about the challenges. So. And then we can start, hopefully, moving on to a few of the solutions, which I know Jamie is very invested in. So, challenges. Jamie, where should we start?
There's 3 big ones. Total cost of ownership. So, the capital cost of these vehicles is astronomical, yeah? £250,000 starting point, yeah?
Yep.
And then charging infrastructure on top of that. But then we know that electricity can be cheaper, but it's hugely variable. You can pay 10 pence a kilowatt hour, you can pay 30 pence. If you're charging en route, could be 40, 50 pence. So working all that stuff out is a real challenge. And actually, it's one of the key unlockers as well, because I think if we can prove that they're cheaper to run, then there'll be a huge step up in adoption, because they're commercial vehicles. Yeah, there's no kind of heart attached to it. If they're cheaper, then people will buy them. The other one is weights and dimensions. So big batteries mean you can't carry as much on the truck, which is an issue for a lot of vehicles. And then infrastructure, getting the chargers in the right place, getting energy into your depot. That collision of transport and energy, they speak different languages. The processes aren't fit for purpose. So they're the three big ones.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of the time people talk about, I think it's for people who don't understand it, is sometimes the range and the charging speed. Whereas the range on some of these newer electric HGVs and the charging speed actually ties in quite nicely with the actual breaks that HGV drivers have to take, right?
Yeah, so after like 4.5 hours, you're mandated to take a break. So if there's a charger in that location, then you haven't got a problem, as long as you can put enough charge in it to get to the next point in the time that you've got on that break. So if that kind of orchestration piece works, then these vehicles can do everything a diesel truck can.
So as long as, according to my calculator, as long as these trucks can do 270 miles, then there isn't a range issue. And we've already said that the Mercedes can do up to about 300. I know that the DAF, they say in most conditions, in most pulling weights, it will do 250, 260. On a good day, it will do a lot more than that. So we're pretty much there from a range point of view. So, and charging, I think, is the charging speeds of those vehicles enough? And we'll talk about CCS and megawatt charging in a minute, but is it enough to get them enough to go for another 4.5 hours?
In a lot of cases, yes. So on the newer vehicles, definitely. So the Mercedes can charge up to 400 kilowatt. So yeah, that can, you get 45 minutes on one of those chargers. Yeah, that's enough to do that next stint.
Yeah, I've got a question on the, because obviously that some of you listeners, viewers won't know about. You said about the costs and stuff. Typically, how much is a diesel truck and how much is an electric one? Just to put it into numbers for people to understand how, because I don't have no idea how much it is if I wanted to go out and buy a diesel Arctic tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it varies immensely from OEMs to relationships to specifications, but you're looking at £150,000 for like a decent spec Arctic unit, and then the electrics are, they can be double.
And I think a lot of people don't realise that hydrogen trucks are about £800,000. The future for a lot of people. I know that Alex is quite a keen in the hydrogen camp. And I think hydrogen will be there for certain use cases, because the challenges that I think we'll touch on a little bit more, or we have just done in terms of weight. But the data isn't back yet, and we must trust the data. And this is what ZHID is all about, as Jamie mentioned earlier. Test alternative fuels with not just electric, and seeing the amazing progress that's happening there already, even within the 3 years that Welch Group have had their Renault. Another 3 years on, we've got megawatt charging that can charge. We're talking sort of 400 up to potentially a megawatt very, very soon, and the range of these vehicles. But yes, I suppose before we talk about the other alternative fuels, try not to jump about too much, but we talked about the cost. But I think from the TCOs that you've seen, Jamie, and I'm trying to be completely balanced and not talk about what I've seen, but what's kind of been the main factor for your business making the costs work? What is it? The extending the life of the vehicle? Is it the electricity cost? Was it charging infrastructure? What part was the most significant?
Extending the life of a vehicle makes a big difference. And like I said before, we don't really know what that looks like yet. We presume that we think we know what it looks like. The big one for me is your cost of energy. If you get that cost of energy down, then it's everything. It makes such a huge difference. And there's so many ways to do it as well. I really get into the really kind of nerdy energy market stuff. So like demand side response, flexibility service. You start talking about, you know, V to G, bidirectional charging, playing around with the tariffs, getting some battery energy storage on site can make a huge difference.
Actually, on that thing, because of the energy costs and stuff, I think it'd be good to give people an idea of how much people don't think they think about range in electric trucks, but they don't think about efficiency. So typically, how many miles per gallon would you get out of a diesel truck? Because then we can put it into the relationship of cars and how long the range would be in a car if they did that.
MPG on an Arctic, maybe 9.
Yeah, so you work that out. So typically, what would the range of a fueled car be? That
calculator?
Yeah, well, you think 9. So if you were in a petrol car or diesel car, so there was a 10-gallon tank would be a reasonably big one. So you'd get 90 miles range, basically. So this is how you can see how the efficiencies are when you think of, you know, yes, we think of 400-500 kilowatt hours is big, but it's not when you consider how many liters of fuel and the energy that would be.
Yeah, it's a massive amount of energy. It's an absolutely ginormous amount of energy. And when you kind of relate it to charging, you start to realize that these logistics depots are going to be drawing as much power as small towns, like absolutely massive amounts of energy, which isn't necessarily a problem from a like generation point of view. So like we're generating loads of energy, too much. Yeah, we're always turning off the wind farms because we're getting too much energy. The challenge is getting it to where it needs to be. So not in the mountains of Scotland, but down in Cambridgeshire where I can put it in one of my trucks.
Yeah, you talked about as well doing sort of looking at the renewables as well, and so I mean, has that been a major part of your kind of depot deployment yet, or is it just sort of battery storage for getting the cheaper rates and stuff?
It's like throwing a tic tac into the sun, trying to put solar energy into a truck. Yeah. So I think like all the solar on our warehouse at the moment basically kind of runs the depot. And the one truck uses more energy than the rest of the depot does. So, you know, it helps do it. It makes sense, but don't think it's going to have a significant impact.
Yeah.
Maybe we could buy one of the fields next door and...
Sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, power and size aside, when you're looking at public charging, because obviously that's going to be a big part of any sort of longer distance routes, what do truck drivers need in terms of that infrastructure? Because I mean, the whole queuing thing gets talked about with cars quite a lot. I mean, do you see that they're going to need sort of a more sophisticated way of sort of booking into those charging points and making sure that, because it's all very well having those in place, but if you suddenly have to queue for an extra half hour to an hour, that can be quite a costly delay. That can make a big impact to your TCO on those trucks as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's not going to be a problem we're going to have for a while, but it's going to come. We actually did an Innovate UK project last year or the year before, looking at this sort of stuff. So how do you use the data that we have coming from vehicles and planning systems to make a booking system a bit more dynamic and a bit more intelligent? Because at the moment, I guess you've got the idea that like a transport operator will sit there and go, you know, well, actually, I can see that I'm going past this charging location, so I'm going to book an hour because you book an hour, and that's roughly what you're going to need. But actually, if you dig into the data, you know from the telematics exactly what the state of charge is, you know from the planning system where you're going to go next, and you know when that vehicle's likely to arrive. So you can be a lot smarter with it. And we did have an early prototype working that would sort of dynamically adjust those booking windows depending on whether the truck was early and the truck was late and what that will look like. So that kind of digital orchestration over kind of like an entire logistics system, I think will solve a lot of that. And that's all stuff that's kind of happening hand in hand with this transition to new fuels, is this transition to, you know, better digital systems that can handle that complexity. Yeah.
Yeah, Tesla's actually got a system like that in place for supercharging, hasn't it? Where it knows where all the vehicles that will be passing through that area and roughly when they'll arrive and what state of charge and so on. You can be even more precise once you've got driver's hours logged into that. Presumably, there's a real opportunity to be very intelligent with that. So,
Yeah, and kind of a level of collaboration between different operators, even if they can all buy into these same networks, you can be much more efficient.
I don't think we're going to talk about the Tesla and the US market so much, but I mean, Tesla obviously done really well with the semi and it gets amazing results. And I think they're still pumping them out and the results have looked good, but I've not heard anything recently from what's happening with that. Probably.
I believe they're slightly too wide for UK roads. So there's going to have to be like a step change in legislation for them to use them, and actually narrowing a truck by an inch isn't like an easy engineering challenge. Like they'd have to go right back to the drawing board. So I can't see them doing that either.
I was lucky enough to sit in one at the IAA show in Germany, and it was an amazing truck. Very, very cool. So I suppose just to summarize some of the challenges. So we've talked about the cost. Jamie has highlighted that the electricity cost per kilowatt hour can make the biggest impact because of the number of miles that they're doing and the energy consumption ultimately. Optimizing each stage of it, make sure you get the right vehicle, of course, that's got the right range and the right charging speed for your particular operation, because everyone's operation is going to be different, and charging infrastructure, making sure you're not future-proofing it too much. You mentioned you got 150 kilowatt chargers at your Cambridge site, and you say that you've just upgraded the infrastructure at Bedford. What infrastructure, how does it differ from your previous infrastructure to your new infrastructure?
The new stuff's wild. So we've got these Voltempo hyperchargers. So it's a brand new 1 MVA grid connection going into a 1 megawatt charger with six connectors. And it can dynamically shift the load between those 6 connectors. So you can have like one pumping out 450, for example, and the other one sat there putting along at 50. Or you can have 150 each on each of them, depending on your situation, and adjusting that for needs, depending on if you've got a visitor in that just needs a quick splash and dash and they just want a quick charge, versus whether you've got a rigid that sat there for 8-10 hours or whatever and just doesn't need it. And one of those connectors is what we call MCS ready. You'll just take the plug off basically and put a new plug on it, and it can deliver 1 megawatt of power through a single connector.
It's like a triangle shape, isn't it? It's a real heavy beast, isn't it?
Water-cooled pipes.
Yeah.
And they can theoretically charge up to 3.5 on MCS.
Wow.
A long way from that, but yeah, huge amount of power.
Yeah, 3,500 kilowatts is quite a bit. I mean, I don't think it'd be interesting to see what the future holds for sort of 2040, and I do want us to touch on AI as well, because I think that's going to be an important part, especially if people have seen what's happening in that world. What time? How are we doing? Are we okay for now? So we're talking about charging. So it does sound like in Bedford you've got an amazing infrastructure going in then. Very interesting. Is it going to be open to? Is it shared charging infrastructure?
We was big proponents of that from the outset. So we operate within an organisation called the Transport Association, which is, I hate to use the word cartel, but that's kind of how it started. A load of legacy truck operators that work collaboratively. We park at each other's yards, we give each other backloads, and for the past 70 years or something, we've sold each other diesel. We all bunker diesel and we sell each other diesel. So that idea is not at all foreign to us. So offering out our charging facilities and in return getting an expansion to that network, I think is going to be a really important part of it.
And is that going to be open to HGV, all commercial fleet, or?
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I'm not expecting them to be queuing out the door. So, and as you guys know, like utilization is everything with these sorts of assets, isn't it? So, Joe Public and his Tesla's not going to be able to come in and charge, but we'll let your vans in.
Okay, that's a shame.
You can have it. You're different, Tim. Yeah, you can pop in if you need.
A lot of people say that.
The Voltempo thing you mentioned, that's made in the UK, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They're the lead partner in the ZHID demonstrator.
Yeah. So there's 3 consortiums in ZHID, Zero Emission Heavy Goods Infrastructure. One run by GridServe, your mate Sam Kev. One run by Voltempo, and Dynamon do the analysis for that. And then we run Zen8, which BP used to run, which is electric and hydrogen. And only last week, the specific hydrogen consortium, High Hall, unfortunately, is not progressing now because they weren't able to get enough fleets on board, unfortunately. So Zeehed, which Dynamon leads, we are the only hydrogen and electric, but the only hydrogen factor in that that demonstration. So it's really important to make sure that we get the data. You know, whether people think hydrogen will work or not, it's important to get the data to make decisions from it at the end of the day. So someone just so Commute Branch Line, thanks for sharing this, mentioned that there was some recent news from Tesla that the semi factory has a refurbished truck with engineering updates and improvements driven by data and user feedback from the Pepsi trial. So that's good to hear. Thanks for sharing, mate. And apparently GridServe were launching a series of eHGV charging stations. Yes, they were. I've not seen anything recently whereby it was going to be completely redesigned and have a huge eHGV area. Yeah, quite a lot of the GridServe infrastructure sites now have the option for the bigger vehicles. But I don't think that people are ever going to charge there really, because it's like 70, 80p. So no operator will really use it, will they? Let's be honest. Unless it's just a demo.
Unless it's government funded, yeah.
Or that. So, yeah, I mean, there's not only Zeehed, but there's a new Scottish consortium going on as well. So there is a lot going on with HGV trucks at the moment. And from a progress point of view, I've heard from multiple OEMs that their demo vehicles are actually booked up the whole of next year. So there does sound like there is a lot of excitement going on with electric trucks. So actually, sorry, go on, Kev.
Well, actually, could you mention the 80 pence there? I mean, what is the price point that electricity needs to cost to break even on a truck? What is there? Is there kind of a figure in that it needs to be around for a truck to be, for that total cost of ownership model to work?
A lot of people say parity is around 25 pence. If you can get below 25 pence, then you're onto a winner. And that doesn't include installing your own infrastructure. So there is a cost to that, obviously. But do you kind of allocate that to the 2 trucks that you're running, or do you allocate that to the 100 trucks that you might be able to run? And there's a lot of complexity around that. Yeah, one of the interesting things that I've been looking at recently is this idea of logistics being an energy intensive industry, which is like a very specific kind of government classification that big industrial processes get, where they get like cheap energy because it's crucial to what they're doing, which sounds a lot like what logistics is going to be. And some of those guys pay as little as sort of 8-10 pence a kilowatt hour, and at that point it becomes an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, I think when I've done a bit of modeling with I think they call it TCC instead of TCO, where you put you put in the vehicle cost, the mileage that they're doing, how many vehicles you're running, and you put in the charging infrastructure costs. And I think when I was doing a few of the modeling, it really does need to be under 20 pence for it to work. But then again, it depends on the charging infrastructure, because you could potentially, depending on your organization, run some 40 kilowatt chem power or similar other chargers are available, plug in 63 amp 3-phase connection, charge overnight for a 400 kilowatt hour battery, 10 hours, off you go. Nice and cheap infrastructure. Or you could go volt tempo, get megawatt charging, and the eyes water at what that costs at the moment. But economies of scale will bring these costs down as technology starts to level off a little bit and more infrastructure goes in. So I think it's got to be case by case. And at this point, I feel like I'm going into Dynamon mode a little bit here, Jamie. So what you need to do is you need to look at your data you do need to do that. But anyway, this isn't about selling Dynamon or recommending Dynamon unless you want to. Just give us an email. It's fine. Anyway, moving on. So
the other interesting thing that I've seen on the trucking front, there's a trial in Europe, in France, with Sever Logistics. Have you seen that one over there, where they're looking into having a thing where you relay freight over longer distances. So you have a series of charging hubs, and your drivers will go from point A to point B, at which point someone from going from C to B will pick it up, and then driver A will pick up something at B and go back to A with it. So they always go back to base every evening. So they charge Yeah, they do like one trip and then they do a return trip, and they always know where they're going. And they were saying with that you, because I don't know how much of a driver. There always seems to be a debate about how much of a driver shortage there is. There's been this big thing about a driver shortage, which is then kind of, some people say there's no driver shortage, other people say there's a massive driver shortage, and I've never been able to kind of figure out who's talking nonsense and who isn't. But they're saying that this then potentially makes it more of an attractive career choice because you're never away from home. You drive, 4 hours, 4 hours in one direction, swap your trailer, and then you drive back, 4 hours in the other direction. You go and see your kids at night. So
it
could be an interesting way of getting people back in.
Goes back to that idea of digital orchestration, just having a layer of intelligence over the system that can make interesting logistics models like that feasible, because you can't do that with an old bloke and an Excel spreadsheet and a pencil and notepad. There's got to be some like really serious tech that can make that work.
I think because there was someone talking about hydrogen, if we just have a look at alternative fuels for a second. So I touched on hydrogen earlier within the ZHID project. And we mentioned before that the hydrogen trucks, although electric trucks are double the price of diesel, hydrogen trucks are then double the price of electric. And then there is the challenges on hydrogen from a cost of infrastructure point of view. And there is still a lot of grant money going in certain areas for hydrogen, testing, hydrogen vehicles. But I still think that we are a long way away from the use case for that. But we do have to trust the trials. But Jamie, obviously you guys have gone full steam ahead in electric, but what do you see in the market with regards to not so much HVO, because that's an easy, generally speaking, a drop-in fuel to save on carbon, which does cost a little bit more. But what about CNG and LNG? Where do you see that playing a part for decarbonisation of heavy goods vehicles?
I think what you need to remember is that you need to look kind of outside your industry. And I think if you started investing in those fuel types maybe 5 years ago and you're running them now, it makes a huge amount of sense. I think we're too close to electric being viable on most use cases for it to be worth investing in those trucks, because unlike the drop-in fuels, you've got to have a specific truck that's built for it, and again a completely different set of infrastructure than what exists. And I think the way we see it is that we're heading straight to the end game, and it might make sense to some people, and I know it makes a lot of commercial sense for some big fleets now, and like they're saving money on diesel already and decarbonizing at the same time. But they're gonna go electric eventually. I can't see.
Do you run any have you trialed any other alternative fuels, or did you just jump straight to electric?
We use HVO now and again. I mean, the beauty of a drop-in fuel is that you can play around with it and move back again. It's kind of it's more of a commercial piece than anything, which is the be all and end all in our world. So HVO fluctuates in different ways to diesel, like it doesn't track. So sometimes the gap is quite small and it's worthwhile that you can pay a few more pence a litre and you can put HVO in and you can do a good thing. But if that gap widens, then that's your profit margin. We're a single digit profit industry. If you're making 5%, then everyone's happy. So, and fuel being a third of your cost base, if that fluctuates even slightly, then you're in trouble. It can be really painful. So the reason that we think electric's the way to go is that it can be cheaper. It might not be now. It is in some cases, I think, but it will be, and everyone seems to agree on that.
What I've learned more recently, the last couple of years working with Dynamon, is the fact that from a HGV point of view, there's so many small operators out there. And for family-owned businesses that might only have one or a couple of trucks, how much of an investment electric is, or any alternative fuel. How do you think that whether it's the government or the industry is going to help those type of operators to still stay in business and move forward? And let's just call it decarbonisation for now. But ultimately, I'm thinking electric. That's my kind of That's my kind of not necessarily silver bullet, but I think that's the way it ought to go. But what help is there out there for those type of operators, Jamie?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I think market forces will solve this for us on a timeline. They will become commercially advantageous, and everyone will just jump. But we've got a deadline. We're trying to do it quickly, and market forces don't respect that. So this is where I guess policy comes in, and some kind of roadmap or deadline becomes a powerful tool to make that happen. And there's a lot of talk about what that looks like for trucks, whether it's a zero emission vehicle mandate like we've had with cars and vans. There's already kind of a soft deadline for 2035 and 2040 for the end of sale date of diesel vehicles, but it's not written into law. I think what we do need is like a real clear direction of travel of this is where we're trying to get to, but it's difficult, like you say, without hurting those small operators that don't have the capital to put into this stuff. So maybe there should be some kind of support from, government that includes some sort of, financial backing. There's grants, there's the depot charging scheme that we've seen, there's a plug-in truck grant, all that sort of stuff helps. But actually, when you kind of look at the whole big picture, operators are savvy. They just crunch through the numbers and they work out the total cost of ownership. So whether there's a grant or not a grant, or whether the trucks are cheaper, it actually doesn't make a huge amount of difference. I think one of the biggest things that are stopping people is that kind of indecision of whether this is all going to go away, because that's a reality that there could be a change in government, and like we've seen in the States, actually a lot of these targets gets put back and no one's interested anymore, and then those operators can just carry on doing what they've always done, and be quite happy about it, and they'll switch eventually because the operator next door that's figured out that electric's cheaper than diesel has made the switch, and then they're losing contracts and they have to, and they're forced to.
And then it could be potentially too late for them. There is actually a really good grant. It's a shame that they're not doing it in England. In Scotland, Transport Scotland, they're doing a grant for SMEs. So SMEs, so small and medium enterprises, up to 100 vehicles, over 7.5 ton, where they get a grant for doing the kind of analysis that Dynamon do, funnily enough. So yeah, there's a plug for you. So if there are any family-owned businesses that are interested to know what it looks like for their business, get in contact, because that money's there. As long as you can apply very soon. I think it ends very soon, like 15th of Jan. So yeah, getting your interest very, very soon.
Other EV feasibility solutions are available.
They are. Just to be fair and balanced, and that's what the YEV podcast is all about. Thank you, Jamie, for pulling me up on that.
The other potential issue is going to be in terms of competitiveness. There's growing pressure on large businesses to report supply chain emissions. So if you're a supplier to a large business that's reporting carbon emissions and has got quite strict targets in place, you're going to struggle to compete. Even if you're a small, a tiny business with 1 or 2 trucks, if you're providing services, you may end up losing out to a business that doesn't impact on those wider, scope 3 supply chain targets that people are putting in place. And that can go cross borders and all sorts of things as well. That could be quite influential in itself.
Yeah, the idea of putting more of a price on carbon, I think, could be quite powerful. But again, something you've got to be really, really careful with, so as to not disrupt the way this industry works with the big tier ones and the medium operators like us, and then the little guys. There's a logic to it that has worked for 100 years, and we kind of want to keep hold of that whilst transitioning into this future.
Yeah, with that in mind, I mean, you've got a lot of sort of the smaller than your businesses that work on used trucks, so they don't have that. I mean, how is that working with, is there any data yet on that? Are electric trucks suffering similar depreciation issues as cars, or are they tending to hold their money because there's so few of them at the moment? It's just for those operators, how are they going to work on the ones that use the used, the older trucks from some of the larger operators?
I think it's too soon. I don't know whether we've seen a used electric truck yet. I've certainly not seen one. But it'll come. I think you'll see. I think that you might have to wait maybe 3-4 years for that kind of first batch to come off the big tier 1 fleets. So Amazon have just bought like 160 or something. So they're not going to keep them for 10 years. They'll 3-4 years. I would imagine they'll be on the market, and then we'll start seeing some numbers come through. But I would imagine, I mean, the difference in a commercial vehicle to a passenger vehicle is that it's priced almost purely on the return you can get from running it as a commercial vehicle, as opposed to it being this aspirational piece of convenience that just gets you about. So I can see it being different, but we'll see.
So a big subject, which Jamie, I think you're very interested in, is the autonomous vehicle side of things. And I've seen quite a lot of interesting autonomous charging in some of the ports. And China, I've seen quite a few vehicles, driverless vehicles out there. What do you think the future is in the UK, just to focus on our area?
It's a complete game changer, isn't it? We've already spoke about payload constraints, and we've spoken about how you kind of got to orchestrate charging to driver breaks. And actually all those things go away if you can get driverless trucks on the road.
And lack of drivers out there, supposedly, as well, right?
All those things. And it will be about low-hanging fruit in the same way that electrification is about low-hanging fruit. So I think we're a long, long way away from autonomous rigid vehicles pottering around central London and going through cities doing multi-drop and tail lifts and all that kind of stuff. But I think we're closer than a lot of people think to autonomous trucks doing DC to DC, pallet network trunking, that kind of stuff, strategic motorways. And there's a lot of appetite from UK government as well to kind of accelerate that. I think there is a view that with electrification, we've almost kind of lost out at this point, financially as a country. You know, when we're buying batteries, we're buying them from China regardless. But with autonomy, there's a huge amount of talent in this country coming out of the prestigious universities that we've got that we want to keep in this country and sort of develop that as an industry. So there's an organization called Zenzik, and they're running this program called CAM Pathfinder, CAM being Connected Autonomous Mobility. And there's a couple of freight programs that are starting to appear, and there's a change in legislation that's due to come up towards the end of 2027 that will allow some on-the-road trials. So it's going to be a really, really interesting space.
Yeah. So what's happened with, I mean, there were experiments on platooning, so assisted kind of autonomy. I mean, has that sort of stopped? Basically the fact of almost tying them together quite close with the technology being used to drive them closer to save fuel. I mean, is that still a thing?
They'll be part of these programs in the same way that we're running ZHID at the moment, trialing the different types of electrification and decarbonisation. They'll be trialing different types of autonomy and what that looks like in different circumstances, and start small and build. But the commercial advantage of removing a driver from a vehicle is just absolutely astronomical. I've always said that with autonomous cars, you're in the car anyway. You kind of might as well drive. It's convenience over anything, isn't it? I mean, obviously that's quite simplistic, but we talk about fuel being a third of our cost base. Well, another third of our cost base is drivers. And in a 5% margin industry, I mean, that's massive. It's absolutely massive.
But also, once you don't have a driver, you don't have to have a cab, you don't have to have space for a driver and the weight of the.
So you could increase the payload, you can get more pallet. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy when you dig into the numbers. It's absolutely mind blowing. But yeah, not without its challenges. Yeah, our road network, the infrastructure isn't great. The roads aren't great. It's quite a complicated road network. Roundabouts that some places don't have. But
when
yeah,
you talk about
figuring that stuff out.
Again, there's lots of there's talks about doing things with hubs, a bit like the Sever stuff that I mentioned about earlier, isn't there? Where you have autonomous vehicles that do hub to hub, but then you have vans that will pick up the freight at those hubs and take them out to. So you'll just have instead of actually having those vehicles going anywhere near the complex parts of the road network, you'll have this kind of very simple yard with motorway network between it, and it will just take it from yard to yard to yard to yard, and they'll get loaded and unloaded within those, and then driven on manned vehicles for the rest for the last mile or the medium mile stuff. It's quite interesting. Lots of stuff, of ways of kind of bridging the gap while we reach higher levels of autonomy.
So on such a tight margin as well, I mean, how much just in logistics for obviously fueled trucks is how much does it cost a year for things like traffic congestion and stuff to that industry? I mean, it must be an astronomical thing. I mean, I say this as me and Alex got stuck, in Wales for 5 hours, trying to leave and do 15 miles. I mean, things like that are obviously going to be a big cost base for a fuel truck, whereas they're going to be far less for an electric truck, which is basically off. Because I'm guessing that trucks generally don't have the same start-stop systems as cars when they're in queues of traffic.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess always going back to that same point of orchestration, just being smarter about being able to manage these systems and bring efficiency to it. I mention efficiency a lot because it's just everything in our world.
Okay.
Speaking my language, efficiency one.
So Kevin, Captain Efficiency, as I like to call him. If I just roll through some of the comments, and if we just quickly hammer those out, and then just talk about some, I suppose, what do you see happening, Jamie, in the next, I would say, the next 5 years coming up to 2030, although it's 4 years, isn't it? Very, very soon. So Lewis mentioned, is there any palm oil in HVO? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I think they don't know, do they? There's it's one of the problems. There are some ethical concerns around HVO. I think a study recently discovered that we're actually already using more HVO than we are able to produce out of used cooking oil. Yeah, so it's coming from somewhere.
We need to do some more cooking, essentially.
McDonald's take it from their own. I'm assuming McDonald's take it from their own supply.
Yeah.
We've got Commuter Branch Line. Thanks for chipping in, mate. Commercially manufactured hydrogen is derived from petroleum products using a mix of electricity and expensive manufacturing plant. Why not cut out the petroleum process and go straight to electric? Well, I'm not going to argue with that. There are 10 different colors of hydrogen. There's 10 different colors of hydrogen, right? I mean, green and pink are good, but as many people might know, actually,
most is grey, isn't it?
Yes,
most is grey hydrogen, which is produced with large amounts of heat, which involves large amounts of energy, usually from fossil fuels. So yeah, it's not. There are problems to solve with hydrogen, certainly, but there's problems to solve with all of them, aren't there? Really,
sort of the statement of the century.
Yeah.
I think that issue of grey hydrogen is the thing that a lot of people miss when they talk about hydrogen in commercial vehicles or any type of mobility. Is that there is this absolutely ginormous amount of grey hydrogen that's used in industry at the moment that needs to decarbonize before they even think about using it in any other industries. So yeah, I think we should focus on that first because it's a big enough challenge in itself. And then if there's anything left over, maybe we can put it in boats or planes or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's ages ago when I was working in the charge infrastructure industry. There were people building hydrogen hybrid boats, vessels. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the mix looks like. There's a lot of testing, isn't there, at the moment, and understanding what's going to be best. Commuter Branch Line put in Tesla in the USA, and perhaps Australia will pioneer autonomous trucking along with platooning, where they have lots of wide, straight highways. Twisty UK and EU will follow later. Yeah, potentially. I mean, and that's what they've done with full self-driving Waymo and that sort of thing, which is starting to come into the UK. But so it'd be interesting to see what happens there. But Jamie,
the advantage for the truck is that the value of the truck is that much higher. You can do it properly with things like LiDAR rather than relying on cameras.
There's a company called Aurora in Texas that have got trucks on the road today. They've got a YouTube channel where they live stream from the cab. They're autonomous trucks. So at any point you can go in and watch them driving around. It's pretty cool.
I'm pretty sure that as soon as you see, I don't know if you guys remember the game Carmageddon or the film. So we'll know if it's gone wrong when on TikTok or one of the social media channels we see just bodies just flying everywhere. We hope that that's not going to happen, of course.
Yeah, and I'm guessing with the truck thing, you could do something similar to you do with those little robots that deliver stuff in Milton Keynes, where on the complex bit they have the person who can then kind of jump on and do multiple trucks because they're just jumping on for those complex bits. At the end,
single drivers looking after a fleet of vehicles from a remote pod with nice coffee and
that's
we've got them in Cambridge.
But do you know what? We had them in the Higham ferries, but they seem to have disappeared. I think if people treat them like they do the electric scooters around here, I'm not surprised. But yeah, no, Jamie,
say thank if they get stuck and you help them. They say thank you to you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Well, but yeah, Jamie, what do you think is going to happen on the stretch up to 2030? What are the key positives you think that need to happen and will happen?
I think it's about scale at this point, isn't it? Just seeing more people coming on board, operators that are running these trucks, getting more trucks, getting new people in, because it works better if everyone's sort of along for the ride. There's a sense of scale, when you talk about charging infrastructure and shared infrastructure and economies of scale, bringing prices of trucks down. It's just about getting more trucks on the road, making it more visible, and I guess like myth busting. Yeah, you think the car world has got a problem with FUD and old information. You try talking to some truck operators. Yeah, according to them, they can only go 50 miles and then they just explode.
And I mentioned at the beginning, the 12 pillars of change. And if anyone's interested in this subject, I'd recommend going to check out the YouTube channel that Jamie's added these really interesting discussions from key people in the industry. What loading bay is the
loading bay? Yeah. Shameless plug.
Yeah, so yeah, check that out, guys. But yeah, what is it you guys are hoping to achieve from that 12 pillars of change? 12 pillars of change.
The key idea behind 12 pillars is that a lot of operators feel like this transition is being done to them rather than with them. And alongside that is this idea, and I mentioned it before, about this kind of like collision of industries that don't necessarily speak the same language. So the 12 pillars are the 12 different parts of this industry that need to collaborate to make this transition happen. So getting all the right people in the room, whether they're trade bodies or charging infrastructure providers or DNOs or operators and all that stuff, and get them all around the table just to really hash this stuff out. So yeah, we did an event. There's like 4 hours worth of footage from that event where you can hear some pretty cool people talk about this stuff. And next year we're going to run some workshops off the barriers that we've discussed here today and trying to figure out the best way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Because having these discussions and having everyone in the room is important to drive things forward, isn't it? At the end of the day, is there anything else that you'd like to discuss on the topic? Because I think we need to wind down and just do our normal kind of what we're doing this week and what we've done last week in the EV world. But Jamie, is there any other topics or any other subjects that you wanted to touch on?
No, we're good. We've done a nice kind of skim over the surface of it all, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. We can always go deeper on another subject if people want, and whack it in the comments, people, if now or at a later date, if there's a particular subject in HGV, electric or otherwise, that you'd like us to delve into, and we can either get Jamie back on or someone else, or we can just discuss it across the three of us. But at this point now, Jamie, we like to talk about what we've been doing and what we are doing. It's probably going to involve a lot of Christmas activities, but Alex, you might as well start us off. What have you been up to?
Well, this week I intend to eat Christmas dinner and have a few nice drinks. No, I mean I've been testing the Geely EX5 for a week and a bit now.
What's that?
The Geely EX5. So that's
Geely. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's a new SUV, one of the many at the kind of the 4.6 meter electric screen-filled kind of point in the market, and I've been more impressed with it than I was expecting. Actually, there's more to talk about on that than I kind of thought there was first time around. But that goes back tomorrow. So Christmas wind down, and I'm back in my Vauxhall. No,
and preparing for the EV quiz next week, of course.
Indeed,
Alex.
Yeah.
Yes. What are you up to?
So last week I was driving the IM6, the performance one, which, because obviously everyone needs 751 brake horsepower in a car.
Definitely.
I mean, the problem being it does have a side effect having 751 brake horsepower. Briefly, for the first 200 miles I drove it, I couldn't get more than 2 miles per kilowatt hour out of it. But later on, once I got used to it, it was 2.9. I averaged over 700 miles. But, you know, great car, but it's the Halo model. I mean, if you were going to pick one, you'd pick the smaller 300 odd brake horsepower ones that go a lot further. But the air suspension was nice on it. It was
Nice.
it's very weird when you stop and it lowers the car to let you get in the boot. And this week, and usually I'll be driving my own car for a change, which only has 2 months left until I have to get it ends its lease. So what will I pick?
Well, I'm going to be working all the way through. Annoyingly, I did an update on the TVR video, but the sound was absolutely rubbish. So I'll scrap that and I'll just do a proper update next time. But I was at a car meet today with lots of electric vehicles, and the video is coming out on Wednesday, and getting excited for our end of year EV facts versus fiction quiz. Jamie, feel free to tune in on the 28th next week. But Jamie, what are you up to other than Christmas festivities? You still working, or you kind of slowing down now?
I'm always working. I'm so detached from what the operation do day to day, and I think what I do is so different to what they do that I don't stop. But since we're talking about cars for a little bit, I've just made the jump myself, so I've just got my first EV car. After working with EV trucks for 3 years and driving to decarbonisation events in a Mercedes E-Class. I've just taken ownership of an Ioniq 6.
Ah,
Nice,
cool.
Nice.
Which,
Is
I'm
that
very
the facelift one as well?
Sorry?
Is that the facelift now? The new Ioniq?
No,
6?
no. It's like one of the last of the old ones, yeah. But Ioniq 6 Ultimate in they call it gold, but it's like a matte silver.
Nice.
Cool. I like the Ioniq 6. Really,
It's a cool car. Very cool car. Yeah, Paul Kirby's got one of those, hasn't he?
Yeah.
In the Burgundy. Yeah, I saw him. Go on.
And that disproves everyone I've spoken to says no one buys Ioniq 6s, and everyone goes for the 5 rather than the 6.
Have you sorted out a charger yet, Jamie?
29th, that's getting installed. So yeah.
Okay. What did you go for?
Is it the own ePod?
ePod. No, I've not heard of that one. Other chargers are available, of course. Yeah, cool. No, it sounds exciting, Jamie. I look forward to getting some feedback on that. Jamie, just thank you very, very much for spending more than an hour of your time with us today. It's been really, really insightful to get your viewpoint on these things. And yeah, I'm really interested to see the progress that you're making with the 12 pillars in helping this infrastructure and the logistics industry move forward from electrification, decarbonisation point of way. So yeah, thanks for joining us today.
No, thanks for having us.
Thanks everyone for joining in today. Thanks everyone for their comments, and we will see you next week for the quiz. So make sure you pop in for that. I'm definitely going to have a beer on standby because I'm not drinking during Christmas because I'll be driving. So I'll definitely have a beer in my hand. I apologise in advance. So yeah, thanks Kev, thanks Alex, thanks again Jamie, and we'll see everyone next week.